episode 42 of Two Kevins with Grace and Steele. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
We open with a topic I'm calling After Orlando, the intersectional crack-up. Following the June 12th attack on a gay nightclub in Florida, which ended with 50 dead, including the killer, and another 53 wounded, the coalition of cultural Marxists who promote the politics of identity came undone. The killer made no bones about swearing allegiance to the Islamic State. So the main clash in the shuttered souls of ID politics promoters was, of course, homophobia versus Islamophobia. Which to blame? Which is worse? Many, possibly suffering some kind of collective stroke, decided to blame Christianity. Identity politics publications, like Salon, appearing lost but obviously feeling compelled to report on the event, decided to campaign against one of the guns used that night, the AR-15, until it emerged that this wasn't the gun used that night. But anyway, many followed the tried and true method of avoiding difficult questions in troubled times by focusing exclusively on the victims, revel in the grief. Perhaps that was the best route. As more information emerged, more and more troubling questions appeared. We're recording this 3 days after the Orlando shooting. As it stands now, Kevin, what do you think are the significant outstanding questions that haven't been answered about this atrocity?
Well, there are several. Mm-hmm. I think that the first would be, who was Omar Mateen? We know a little bit about him. But the questions of why was he in the United States, or why was his father in the United States? What was his history in the United States beyond which we know now? The question of his wives, his two wives, and not two at the same time, but their role in what happened, whether this was in fact a conspiracy, as many people believe. But the biggest question is, what is going to be the American response to this? Because that will determine, seems to me, whether the United States is going to survive. Really?
Oh, wow, okay. I never thought you'd go there. What are their options in terms of response? Are we talking about a Donald Trump type response where he says shut down Muslim immigration? And I mean, this guy was born in there. He was anchor baby, it looks like. But
the question, it's whether they're going to accept reality or not.
Okay.
That ignorance is not a blessing, as Donald Trump said in his speech. And the question is whether America is going to agree with him or not. Mm-hmm. That's the big question. Because if they don't agree with him, if they go with the Hillary Clinton line, if they go with the Barack Obama line, then it's all over for the West in terms of its response to the Islamic threat. What we heard from Canada was that, oh yes, a terrible act of terrorism. Let's not really go into who is responsible for this, because that might hurt some feelings.
I suppose it seems rather counterproductive, though, because it's not like it isn't known. So what do they risk by simply mentioning it? They don't have to overemphasize it, but they could just simply mention that this guy's motivation was obviously Islamic fundamentalism. You know, they can.
Oh, well, I mean, that's up in the air.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's up in the air in the sense that Omar Mateen, gay guy, right?
Well, that's what they're suggesting now, yeah.
Well, if he was a homosexual, then this makes his response rather more nuanced, or his action rather more nuanced, given that he did attack a gay nightclub.
Okay, but then all you're doing is sort of justifying their reticence as to naming his motivation.
No, I'm not justifying their reticence. I'll just explain it this way. Okay. Peter Hitchens is fond of saying that these Islamic terrorists, so many of them, well as many other spree shooters, are screw-ups. That many of them are addicted to antidepressants and such like, or they have other mental problems like those two Muslims or quasi-Muslims in Canada, one of whom attempted to shoot up the House of Commons. Mm-hmm. Hitchens is correct about this, but it's largely irrelevant. Because when people who, with a Muslim, Arab, Islamic background, when they go nuts and they seek some sort of vengeance on the world, they look for some sort of context to put this vengeance in, and the context for these people is close to hand, and that context is Islam.
Okay.
Have you heard of this phrase that Vidar uses called, I believe it's called sudden Islamic jihad syndrome or sudden jihad syndrome?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple of times. I never really thought about it a whole lot, but that's what you're thinking has happened in this instance?
I think it's quite possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, he did the
I mean,
Hajj.
this man, I'll just, sorry to interrupt, I'll just say that this fellow seemed to be, for a long time, pretty well integrated into American society.
Mm-hmm.
He was working for a company which had a contract with the United States government. He had been giving, it would appear, weapons training by some sort of agency or agency allied to the United States government. And then, and I'm not saying this definitively, just from what I know from reading the media, that his view of the United States began to darken.
Mm-hmm. But it wasn't
And
sudden, was it?
perhaps because of the influence of some black Muslim that he had met. But in any event, he flips out, and America must be punished because jihad.
Well, yeah, you say the term you used was sudden, though. And, this guy does do his Hajj, so he completes that in 2013, which is 3 years past. It's a rather slow turnaround unless, he didn't take that too seriously. But there are indications that, he did slowly radicalize. It wasn't sudden. He didn't just turn around on a dime and say, oh, now I'm going to, become the martyr because I can no longer stand this sinful life that I'm living. As far as
when I say sudden, I don't necessarily mean overnight.
Mm-hmm.
We have the testimony of someone who had worked with him who said that this guy was, as far as he was concerned, out of control, constantly making these outrageous racial statements and carrying on about the United States in a very nasty way and making threats against him and stalking him. And apparently he quit his job because he was not going to be fired because he was Muslim. I think we see this with the fellow, the Army major, the psychiatrist who shot up Fort Hood.
Hussein or whatever it was. Yeah, I forget his name.
It's a similar sort of thing, that you have a series of provocations that are not met. That the fellow who shot up Fort Hood, he could hardly have made it clearer that he had moved to America is a great Satan position, and he wasn't shy about letting people know about this in the U.S. Army, and their response to this was to promote him. And so, all right, I guess I'll have to take the final step, just to kill people, just to let people know how serious I really am.
Right.
Now, going back to what I was saying, there's a story published this evening from the Washington Post. It's titled, Top Republicans Join Obama in Condemning Trump's Works. Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, who has endorsed Trump, but perhaps he would have been better off without his endorsement. Ryan warned there should be, quote, a security test and not a religious test. Well, of course, the point that Trump is making and others are making is that it's the same test.
Yeah, but he's being nuanced here to...
Yes, Obama became very angry. Calling a threat by a different name does not make it go away. This is a political distraction. This is over the question of radical Islam. Clinton describes Trump's response to Orlando as rife with conspiracy theories and pathological self-congratulations. Pathological. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so let's see. Paul Ryan, Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker expressed serious unease with how Trump responded to a national tragedy. It's at a time when people rally around our country. And it's obviously not what's occurred, and it's very disappointing. I guess he doesn't know what rallying around the country means. It doesn't mean joining hands and singing Imagine.
Well, I guess it does now, but you get the sense.
Hang on, let me think. I'm just going to run through my list here, and then we'll move on, okay? Senator Lindsey Graham said of Trump, I don't think he has the judgment or the temperament, the experience to deal with what we are facing. And Ron Johnson, senator from Wisconsin, called Trump's insinuations about the president offensive. this is a Republican senator.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see who else we got here. I think they name another congressman, but you take my point, that there is a kind of a panic amongst establishment and Republican figures that we all know what we're supposed to do here. After 9/11, the response of the Republicans was, let's go halfway around the world and bomb places and invade them. Now, that's been proved not to work. So in the absence of that, what we do is we sing Kumbaya. And we talk about our prayers and how our thoughts and prayers are with the family, friends and families, blah, blah, blah. In other words, we are going to do nothing.
Until it happens again.
Till it happens again?
Well, it seems to me that this response is a show of weakness, and it's inviting organizations like ISIS or ISIL to double down. I mean, they weren't necessarily the ones that created this, but they can see a certain weakness from the response to it, as far as I'm concerned. And
well, what we've heard, and this has yet to be contradicted, was that right before Mateen started shooting, or shortly after he started shooting, he called up 911 to declare that he was doing this on behalf of ISIS.
I heard he did that a couple of times, actually, but
okay,
that's a quibble.
Now, I'll tell you my own belief about ISIS is that it is not this Ernst Stavro Blofeld supervillain organization, but it would like to take credit for all the acts of Islamic terror around the world. Now, of course, it's significant.
It's an idea, isn't it? More than
well, they're on the ground. Mm-hmm. They're certainly on the ground in Syria and Iraq, and of course, they're being supported by Turkey, our valiant NATO ally.
Right. Well, but they were created by the United States.
Well, yeah. It's a little more complicated than that, but of course, this has happened before. Mm-hmm. Similar cases, Israel's been bit by this, that, we have this group called Al-Qaeda, and how about we have a different group that could be a rival to Al-Qaeda? This is what happened with, I believe, Hezbollah, that Israel decided that the PLO was too much of a threat, so how about if we had a different group that could be a rival? And that got out of hand.
Yeah.
I mentioned this to you a couple of days ago. There was a film directed by Edward Zwick that came out in 1998 called The Siege. Right. It stars Denzel Washington, Annette Bening, Tony Shalhoub, and Bruce Willis. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. As I said then, I didn't see it since you told me about it either, but I will.
Well, what happens is that there is a series of terrorist attacks in the United States. New terror cells launched more devastating attacks. This is from Wikipedia. Starting with the bombing of the New Victory Theater in Times Square during an evening performance, then a hostage situation at an elementary school. Shortly after this, a suicide bomber drives a van full of explosives into the lobby of one federal plaza, the location of the FBI's New York City field office, resulting in over 600 fatalities. And the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions seals off Brooklyn. Okay. Subsequently, all young males of Arab descent are rounded up and detained in Downing Stadium. Now, in this movie, the great, tolerant, liberal people of New York rise up against this military coup. And this is America, damn it. Yes, a multi-ethnic peace march demonstrates against the occupation of Brooklyn. I saw this movie at the time, and of course, this was in 1998, which was 3 years before 9/11. But what was that? 5 or 6 years after the first World Trade Center bombing?
Yeah, that's right.
Underground bombing?
92, 93, something.
And
93.
I got quite angry watching this film in the theater, and I thought to myself, I know what would happen in real life if events such as this, terrorist events such as this in a sequence occurred in New York City, that it would be the opposite. that mobs of people would descend on Americans who even looked swarthy, that Americans of Italian, Greek, Spanish, and Portuguese origins would not leave their homes unless they were literally wearing signs around their necks which said, "I am not a Muslim."
So not the big diversity march.
No.
That people envision. Yeah,
no,
well,
I mean, we have seen
this is a threat
with Lindsey Graham and these other people I mentioned for the Washington Post story that they are completely divorced from reality. That various people, including Canada's own internationally renowned expert on Islam and on security situations, Doug Saunders, they were very smug. He was born in New York City, not far from where Donald Trump was born. He's an American, damn it. Well, you may have seen, according to a Los Angeles Times piece today, that apparently Mateen, quote, wanted America to stop bombing his country, unquote. But he was an American. Which country would that be?
Well, there's that. Plus, he pledged allegiance to ISIS, so it doesn't really matter where he was born. His idea was that he wanted to destroy America. So
this attack is the deadliest single shooting incident, spree killing incident in the history of the United States, is a stake in the heart of what they call the proposition nation. You're familiar with this term?
Oh, yes. We went over it in our nationalist agenda, our nationalist
And of
platform.
Course, the citizens of Smugistan, Canada, yes, we're a proposition nation. Well, Canada wasn't a proposition nation until, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago when these smug idiots decided that, that would be a good way to do things here.
Keep wages stable.
Let's just take 150,000 Somalis, because that's the number, and we'll just bring them to Canada. And because of what John Derbyshire calls the magic dirt here, this will turn them into Canadians, and they'll be a little different apart from the color of their skins and their ethnic background from you and I.
Not a good idea.
Yes. This is a lunatic idea. And this is the test that the United States is facing.
Well, at least Trump they're facing it, though. I mean, they could be just voting along the same lines as, we did in our last election, where it was, how much do you love immigration? Oh, more than you, that kind of thing, which is what, we didn't even get to face the test, right?
Well, we had a little political crisis in Canada today because the Conservative Party was pushing a motion demanding that Justin Trudeau's government acknowledge what ISIS is doing in its area of operations as genocide. Now, this motion does not mention Sunni Islam in this respect. The Liberals rejected the notion, and the Conservatives were all very congratulatory about that because it shows, that they know what's going on. I'm very touched by their devotion to the Yazidis of the Middle East, a group that they had literally not heard of until about 3 days ago. But this has nothing to do with the security situation in our countries. It really doesn't. It's terribly sad what ISIS is doing to various ethnic and religious minorities in Syria and Iraq, but it doesn't really affect us.
So it's a phony crisis for us then, is it? Or you say?
Of course it's a phony crisis. Countries have their sovereignty, which they aim to protect. But of course, our leaders consider the world to be one country, and they consider themselves to be citoyens du monde. Then why would we be any more particularly upset about things going on in Canada and the United States than in things going on in Syria and Iraq? This is insanity.
I do worry a bit for my own country here because, as Donald Trump seems to rise in popularity down in the United States, The shitlibs here in Canada seem intent on going the complete opposite direction as a way to virtue signal. And, I suppose we're already going over the cliff, so we can't go over the cliff, but we'll probably go over the cliff faster if he gets elected, I suppose. That's the thing. I see that being a problem here in Canada.
Well, I don't want to speak too much about Canada because, again, I don't want to bore our largely American audience, but I'll just mention once again my old friend Jason Kenney, who was formerly Minister of Immigration, then Minister of Defense in the Stephen Harper government. In terms of virtue signaling, he is the king. He tweeted today that Justin Trudeau just said that the Liberals are reopening Canada to immigration. That's after a Conservative Party of Canada government that admitted 2.6 million immigrants. That's 2.6 million immigrants in 9 years from 2006 to 2015. Now, there's various things one can say about this. One of the things I said was, hey, genius, subtract 2.6 million immigrants and unemployment would be halved with no talk of a $15 an hour minimum wage. But there is the cultural implication of this. There is the security implementation of this. Of these 2.6 million immigrants, which great white father Jason Kenney helped to shepherd to Canada, 85, 90% of them are from what we used to call the third world. These people are not going to have much of an attachment to this country at all. A great many of them come from hellholes like Somalia and Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. There's a considerable Afghani community in Toronto now.
Mm-hmm.
These people have, well, I'll just repeat it again, they have lost their minds.
Mm-hmm.
That what they say, what they do no longer has any connection with reality. That is the battle that we are in.
Yeah, okay. In the United States, the referendum must be the presidential election then, if that's what you're calling it here.
That'll be a referendum.
Mm-hmm.
There will be, there's going to be another referendum, at least one, before that. And that will be the primary race between Paul Ryan and his opponent, his Republican primary opponent, Paul Nehlen, in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. That's going to be a big signal, is it?
I think so.
Okay. I hadn't flagged that at all. Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. When is that happening?
The primary that Paul Ryan faces, this strong challenger in Paul Nehlen, is August the 9th. So that's going to be a mini referendum, if you will, before the main primary in November.
Okay. Okay, and Brian now is representing the open borders view of the world, according to what you had read to us.
Yeah, the open borders view of the world, the view that we can't stop bringing Muslims into the United States because who's going to lower American wages if we don't?
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand what you're talking about. These votes are coming up. There were some significant things about this shooting, I guess, that, you haven't touched on yet. That I think were the first things that you and I had discussed when it was just hitting the news. And that was this heavy intersectionality that's going on and is only increased with the news that, this guy may have been gay as well. Because all these stories were appearing in a commentary was appearing after the shooting that was trying very hard to blame this on the Christian right, when in fact, this was a Muslim and it was a possible gay guy and there was no connection to Christianity whatsoever. So this intersectionality seemed to be driving a few people like right around the bend. And to me, that's why they're concentrating on talking, praying for the relatives and things like this, because this is just too hard circle to square or square the circle here for them. Do you want to touch on the intersectionality?
Well, the intersectionality came into heavy play when Donald Trump, in his speech, positioned himself as the guarantor of the LGBT community against the Islamic threat.
Mm-hmm.
And something happened today, which is that Gays for Trump was scrubbed from the list of Twitter trending topics by Twitter and was replaced with some sort of LGBTQ hates Trump party.
Okay, so they're trying to engineer this then.
It's a very sad thing that in recent years, whenever we find out that some sort of atrocity is going on, that the majority of the country that pays any attention to this sort of thing, or pays close attention to it rather, is saying, not a white guy, not a white guy, please not a white guy, not a Christian. And the SJWs, the shit libs, are saying, please, 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 Christian white guy, Christian white guy, Christian white guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And originally, San Bernardino, it's a white guy, oh, it's a white guy, right?
Yeah.
This has got to the ridiculous stage when that kid was found in the gorilla enclosure.
Oh, and they shot the gorilla.
White people are responsible for this. White people. Well, it wasn't a white person, was it?
I know, but then, they immediately default to, well, it's about our common humanity here,
Oh, and it's apparently these people like Omar Mateen are, I don't know what they're hanging out at Baptist churches to soak in all of this homophobia. Because that was one of the intersectional lines that, ISIS has nothing to do with it. Islam has nothing to do with it. It's all about guns and the hatred that America has for gay people. Well, if America has hatred for gay people, that would make their triumphs in the last 20 years rather remarkable, wouldn't you say?
I would think, but,
didn't we have the White House bathed in a rainbow?
Yeah.
Not that long ago?
Yeah, you're preaching to the converted here with me, but, to me, it's more the confusion that they're experiencing in making these leaps. And they're not going to be very successful in doing so, as far as I'm concerned. Now, obviously, the hardcore people are going to work really hard at it. You saw that tweet by that Sally Cohen. Love is love is love. She repeated that over, and homophobia is homophobia, blah, 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 over and over again, and that was it.
Well, repeat your original comment to me on this.
Oh, that she sounded like she was sitting, rocking.
She had her knees up to her chin and was rocking back and forth.
On cold pavement, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me. Now,
I'll mention something in that regard. I'm not going to say this with regard to Sally Cohen or others like her with similar responses because I don't know that this is true. Let's just say that it's not true. However, I've stated this before. I'll say it again. It is my belief that one of the reasons why our elite is so detached from reality is because of the use of antidepressant and antipsychotic drugs, that they have softened their brains.
Okay.
There was a top German politician, I believe associated with the Social Democrat Party, who said a few days ago that, we have to have all these migrant Muslims in Germany. Otherwise, we're going to have all of this incest in Germany.
Are you sure it wasn't
That's what he actually said.
You sure?
Leave aside that cousin marriage is off the charts.
Right.
Generation after generation of first cousin marriage amongst Muslims. So if you're worried about the brain softening effects of consanguinity, actually you'd want to keep them out.
Okay. Well, if their brains have gone to mush, then they should be fairly easy to defeat, because they're just going to be addled and confused when they get into the voting booth, I suppose. Yet, they seem to have, made significant gains, and we're to the point now where it's a crisis. That's the thing. You can call them names and you can say that they're out of their skulls and they're insane, but good heavens, we're still heading in their direction. Cultural Marxism is marching.
Let's see. Intersectionality. There's this little shit in Canada called Adam Goldenberg, who older Canadians will remember this name Goldenberg because there was this guy named Eddie Goldenberg who was a top fixer for former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien.
Fast Eddie.
Yeah, and little Adam Goldenberg, who I believe is an Ivy League graduate, when he was, I think, 21 years old, he attempted to become president of the Liberal Party of Canada. Well, in a previous age, I don't know, he would have been pantsed and thrown in a fountain.
Yeah, he was taking advantage of a weak moment.
Survive that humiliation. He is gay. He is gay, 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 gay. And what this event is all about the gays and just the horror that they're subjected to every single day. Muslim, Islam, no. This didn't happen because the shooter was Muslim. It happened because the victims were gay and because the shooter had an assault rifle. Yeah, assault rifle. Islam didn't kill 50 people in Orlando yesterday. An American with an assault rifle did. Saying so isn't politically correct, just correct. Oh, and then he goes on against all religions. Really?
Oh, okay. So that's the easy way out. That's what cowards do.
That's the easy. Oh, and the self-pity. Mm-hmm. Some guy died, 22. 22, shit, my generation of gay men has never had to learn how to bury our friends. We're not supposed to have to. If, God forbid, anything like that happened in Orlando, ever happened in Canada, gay men wouldn't be allowed to donate blood here either. The drip, drip, drip of paws is not allowed to be stopped for one single day. This stuff was being said on Sunday. Oh, are they going to let gays donate blood? No, they're not going to let gays donate blood because it's bad enough that these people were shot without exposing them to the risk of infection in the hospital.
Yeah, well, this is...
Homophobia cannot be fought with Islamophobia, says the lesbian premier of Ontario. And here you see where intersectionality threatens to destroy the left. To utterly destroy it.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking.
Because, I'm against homophobia and I'm against Islamophobia as well. Yeah, well, you're wrong. What do you mean? Well, I'm against homophobia and against Islamophobia, but the way you're saying it triggers me. These people are at each other's throats. Oh, I think that the homophobia aspect of this is a little more important than the Islamophobia. Oh, it's good. Oh, you're going to be like that, are you? No, I think the Islamophobia aspect of this is a little more important, shitlord, than the homophobia aspect.
Well, I think I was suggesting that to you when I was talking about my continued harping on my theory of peak shitlib happening about 2 years ago, and the retreat all liberal causes or shitlib causes, including the homosexual lobby, and the fact that this intersectionality now could cause, I would say, a setback for them because of the fact that they're running around blaming it on Christians. The cucks aren't necessarily going to appreciate that when it's so obviously an Islamic guy. The Islamic folks, of course, are not going to appreciate the victimhood, primacy of victimhood claimed by the homosexuals here. And, everybody could start turning on them. We saw that confused reaction on that British television show where that activist walked off the set. I don't know. Did you ever see that clip, Kevin? I'll make sure we get linked to it here.
Go on.
He said they were trying to claim that it was common humanity had suffered today, and he was insisting that it was a homophobic attack and the homosexuals were the victims. And he got so upset that he stormed off, and the people left behind, they were just confused. And I think that's going to happen to a lot of shitlibs here as well.
Donald Trump has made it clear. There's room for everyone on the Trump train, so long as you put America first.
Mm-hmm. Well, he came down on the side.
If you're gay, even if you're a tranny, I don't care, so long as you put America first. If you are black, if you are Hispanic, if you are whatever, don't care, so long as you put America first. Now, we have seen since Trump's speech that a great number of homosexuals, including some organized groups, have come forward and say, we're supporting Trump because he is the person who seeks to protect us as opposed to these people with their heads in their sand. Just one more. The intersectionality idiocy from little Adam Goldenberg, and you should really look this guy up. I guess we'll link to it. He has one of the most punchable faces I've ever seen. This didn't happen because the shooter was Muslim. It happened because the victims were gay and because the shooter had an assault rifle. When you think of who in America most encourages hatred of gays and ownership of guns, Muslims aren't exactly the people who come to mind. You mean the people who throw homosexuals off rooftops? Those people?
No, not those people. Westboro Church. Oh yeah, Westboro Church.
Yeah, with their lethal signs that they carry.
Yeah, this kind of thing, this kind of carrying on, there's a certain portion of they're going to really drive a wedge here in their own supporters. And I don't think it's going to be a good thing for them. Okay, I think we've got the intersectionality now introduced. There's something that I did want you to mention in regard to this. I don't know whether it's a theory you actually have publicized. It was your talk about the terror attacks, an escalation of terror attacks. The reason I bring this up is because I want to know if you think there's going to be any copycats of this type of thing. Do you think we're going to see?
Well, it's always. I've held the position since 9/11 that it's simply a question of will. That Muslims around the world tend to hold similar positions on the important questions.
Okay.
Sharia law, the rights of other religions, the position, well, at least the official position of homosexuals, what they think about the Jews, the Christians, and others, tends to be the same. There are millions of people in the United States who believe that the United States is the great Satan. Many of these people have been born there, but they believe that the United States is the great Satan. It's simply a question of will. Do they have the will? Now, about 10 years ago, I came up with this hypothesis. And I was led to this by the response to that, what was it, the anthrax threat, supposed anthrax threat, the white powder threat?
The mailings?
In Washington, D.C.?
Mailings, then, yeah.
Yeah, and there was also this father and son duo going around shooting people in the Metro D.C. area.
They weren't father and son. No, they weren't related.
Oh, but they didn't they have some sort of relationship?
No, he may have been adopted.
Okay.
But it was, pretty tenuous stuff. So
yeah, well, Washington, D.C. was reduced to jelly pretty quickly by this. It was pretty shameful, I thought. But here's the idea I came up with. That once a week in some place in the United States, that a terror cell, they attack a soft target, let's say a movie theater or a food court in a mall. And they can attack them with guns, they can attack them with knives. And there would be differences in the nature of the attack depending on whether these people intended to escape or even to get out alive. But the idea is on one Friday that they kill a bunch of Americans in a soft target place, movie theater, food court. Then the next Friday, and of course Friday is the holy day of Muslims, the next Friday they do it again. One more Friday, week 3, they do it again. By week 3, the United States would be in a state of utter terror, panic.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And that's why we hope they're only lone wolves, as Hillary liked to call them, the lone wolves.
But this goes back to what I was saying about Peter Hitchens. It doesn't matter that they're lone wolves. And of course, there's been speculation. Apparently now authorities are, traveling around the world, talking to people around the world to find out whether Omar Mateen was a member of a cell or some sort of organized group.
Right.
That the official story, it doesn't make sense to me.
How so?
How does one man take hundreds of people hostage? How does one man, he only had 2 hands. How does he manage to keep all of these people under control for all this time? Apparently, he's on the phone during part of this. He's using the bathroom during part of this. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It might get straightened out. I did hear something that sounded somewhat plausible today, and I'm not sure if I got going to recite this properly, but that the shooting occurred. There was a horrific blast initially. Then he eventually corralled some people in the bathroom, and that's where he was holding only like 12 hostages in the bathroom, while everybody else that had survived managed to escape somehow or whatever, or they were dying on the floor, wounded. And so the hostage, he only managed to take 12 hostage, and they weren't aware of the number at the time outside. I don't know. That's just what I heard. So
I'm going to propose something, that the order has gone out from, let's say, the Department of Homeland Security, that every police force in the United States has been instructed that when it appears that an incident such as this is happening, that a call is made to Washington, D.C., or perhaps Washington, D.C. calls them. And there's a protocol. And the local police forces are instructed point by point on exactly what they will say and do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the do thing that is the most curious here, because I think one of the initial reactions that both you and I had was this delay seemed very much a Columbine kind of secure the perimeter kind of thing.
Yeah, secure the perimeter. Yeah, we're going to let people bleed out for 3 hours to die in this horrible fashion because we don't want to risk the lives of policemen?
Yeah, that's contrary to what I heard the training had switched to after Columbine, which was that police were trained to go in as fast as possible. Now, I think that did happen to a certain extent here. I'm not sure what happened. They went in and then they backed out. It'd be interesting to hear.
Do you remember that? Sorry to interrupt. Do you remember that incident a few months ago of this shootout at a Waco, Texas biker bar?
Oh, that was a while ago. Yeah, that was
there's been almost no information released about this because of the very strong suspicion that almost all of the fatalities were due to cops shooting wildly.
Yeah, that's true. That could have happened here as well, because I think it's Mike Cernovich had raised a lot of doubt based on the number of rounds that the shooter would have had available to him. And
well, didn't they count rounds and came up with barely over 200?
I don't know if they came up with that or not. So it seems to me that was pretty quick anyway, wasn't it? I mean, they still had people in the hospital. So I don't know what's going to come out of this. And maybe you're right. Maybe they do have a policy now where there's a clamp down. There was some suspicion that Twitter was scooping up a lot of stuff right after.
Well, we do know one thing for a fact, that the 911 calls, as of yesterday at any rate, that the server was gone. That all the 911 calls that were made from roughly midnight to 3 a.m., well, we don't have that information anymore.
Which is strange because, it was reported that he had made these claims of swearing fealty to ISIS. Since that already was out, what difference did it make, unless there was something else on there?
Well, okay, so Obama says originally there's no evidence. We're still, learning about this, and there's no evidence of A, B, C, or D, right? Mm-hmm. Almost immediately, in one of the major American newspapers, a top U.S. official has said something like, this has nothing to do with ISIS, or it does have something to do with ISIS. My point being that who's calling the shots here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to use that phrase. I didn't mean that on purpose. This idea that we've had this with the killing of Osama bin Laden. We get 3 different wildly conflicting stories about what happens. We get wildly conflicting stories about what happened to bin Laden's body. And my assumption is I don't believe a single word of what governments say anymore in situations like these.
You think there's deliberately sowing confusion?
I really don't. The old communist Claude Coburn, the journalist, once said, "Never believe anything until it is officially denied." And I'd just like to say a word with regard to conspiracy theories. I don't like to believe in conspiracy theories because they ultimately lead to madness. Have you ever listened to that late night show? What was it? Hosted by Art? What's his name? Art Bell.
Yeah, I think it's somebody else now.
We were the first people to put him on the air in Canada. So better listen to some of his show, I thought. And no, I'm not going to listen to his show anymore because I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep. A great many of his listeners seem to believe that we couldn't believe the evidence of our own eyes at any time. Mm-hmm. And you start to believe that and you're crazy.
Well,
right?
I did listen to some of that because I used to listen to the old radio programs, and it used to come on after that. Periodically, I'd wake up to hear them discussing things like worms that float in the air that you can only see out of the corner of your eye, but they're everywhere.
You know that movie Men in Black?
Yeah.
Well, they erase people's memories of all the bad stuff, and then they become like Tommy Lee Jones. They're all blissed out, right?
Yeah.
Except that the people who are involved in this know that this is going on, and no one who knew that this was going on could stay sane. Because how do you know they haven't switched out your brain?
Right. Well, actually, okay, so I need you to get your point, but I just want to I want to introduce it, though.
My point is this.
I know. But
after the invasion of Iraq, when we were told weapons of mass destruction, bombs could arrive and missiles could arrive in 45 minutes, and it turned out that every single goddamn thing about that was made up maliciously, I thought my tolerance for conspiracy theory is a lot higher than it used to be.
Yeah, well, I think that's not quite the way you described it before when we were talking about, we received a letter, I think in one of our surveys. We didn't mention it last week, but I just want to mention it now. It was one of our contributors, that is one of our donors, had sent back this thing and had chastised us for accepting conspiracy theories. I think it was the Amanda Carpenter affair with Ted Cruz that he was criticizing us for accepting that too readily. And you had raised the point that, yeah, to a certain extent, but, there's the accepted truth that has to be questioned. And I think that's the point that I was hoping you'd make right now. There's the accepted truth, and perhaps we should question that. So
when it is demonstrated that our governments lie to us on a regular basis, what other position are we supposed to end up in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a healthy skepticism there that I don't think should be allowed.
When I used to watch Crossfire on CNN, when Bill Clinton was president, there were these rumors right from the moment that he entered the White House in 1993 that there was boinking going on. That Clinton was involved in extramarital boinking. Mm-hmm. And this was once discussed on CNN, maybe more than once before. The situation changed with Monica Lewinsky, and it was Paul Begala or one of these, stalwart Democratic flacks who just lost it. This is outrageous. It's unspeakable. It's also ridiculous. Can you imagine the president of the United States actually committing adultery? What, in the Oval Office? Is that where he's supposed to be doing it, in the Oval Office? Well, we had a president, or the United States had a president called Warren Harding, who was boinking a woman in her early 20s in a closet in the White House. And it turns out that this was going on in the Oval Office, or just outside the Oval Office, in an alcove, right? That this was actually going on. And what we were told for years was that you should be deeply ashamed of yourself. You should delete your account. You should just retire from public life, maybe even from private life, if you dare to entertain suspicions of that kind. And guess what? It was all true.
Yeah. Well, that's what they do. I mean, that's the shame aspect, right? They want to shame you out of the truth. That's one aspect of it. And I think that, like I say, a good, healthy skepticism, it's worthwhile.
No. We have to go far beyond skepticism here. We have to go far beyond skepticism. You saw that Trump has refused press credentials to the Washington Post. Right?
Okay. Where are you going with that? Skepticism.
Where I'm going with that? Well, we had some interest in this in the Michelle Fields case.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I believe it was Cernovich who pointed out that the Washington Post was engaged in lying about their own people on the site of the Michelle Fields incident.
Right, yeah. So, yes, and when we brought it up in our post about it, or in our podcast about the Post and that incident, we were remarking on the historical connections between the CIA and the Washington Post, which actually
that's right.
Being done.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
That
interesting.
the Washington Post has a decades-long history, more than half a century, of being part of the deep state.
Mhm.
And Donald Trump has showed us the way. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Do you think that's why he did it? Do you think it's?
Oh no, I think that's why he did it.
Mhm.
Also, wow, the other thing that he's mentioned, which is fairly obvious, why would Jeff Bezos overpay many times
Yeah.
for a dying legacy institution like the Washington Post? Could it be that he owns a company called Amazon, which, shall we say, practices these rather heterodox has these heterodox tax reporting practices?
Right. Yeah. There are also the contracts as well that we saw that are available. The storage contracts that are available to companies like Amazon, huge,
Oh yeah,
multi-billion.
the servers that
Yeah,
they rent out.
yeah. That's part of the deal as well. That there's something of a conflict there.
This came up on Silicon Valley.
Hmm.
Oh, let's just rent some servers. Nah, we can't. What do you mean we can't? Go to those guys. They're not renting us any servers. They're not. Why would they not rent us servers? Well, it would appear that a phone call was made from Hooli, right?
Hmm.
Don't rent these guys servers. Okay. Always glad to be of help.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Silicon Valley showed us the way. What did they do? What was their response? They got their own
They
platform.
built their own.
Yeah.
They built their own.
Until they had enough
There's one
muscle.
last thing I want to talk about in response to this.
Fire away.
That there has been this claim going back to February this year of a technique employed by Twitter called shadow banning.
Mm-hmm.
And Vox Day, I believe, first brought it up. And Breitbart picked up the story. And the claim was made that Twitter has banned some people. They banned Chuck Johnson and they banned Robert Stacey McCain. There have been some other bannings, but those are the two most famous. But the idea is you start banning people outright like that, and people get angry, and you might run into organized resistance. So what we're going to do is we're going to screw with people's Twitter accounts, such that we're not going to distribute people's tweets to the people who are part of their network. We're not going to, and later this idea that we're not going to count their numbers. Well, there were two occasions a couple of months ago where I had reason to believe that this was happening to me. And Twitter was telling me for several hours that no one, in several cases, literally no one had seen any of my tweets. Furthermore, that my numbers just kind of went down by 90%, just like that. I jumped up and down and shouted, virtually as it were. And after a few hours, they stopped doing it. Well, starting on Sunday, it's not just me, a whole bunch of people, and that they showed screen caps of their, daily number of impressions, cratered, down to nothing. As we speak, this is the third day of this for me. And Twitter is, as it were, retroactively erasing the record of any success that I may have had on Twitter. What they were doing the same thing, first of all, that's saying, oh, no one has seen your tweet, or 3 people have seen your tweet. Right now, the default for even the weakest tweet that I publish is 200 plus impressions. So they're bringing this down to 0. But then I look at my 24-hour count, which is on the main page, down to 1,200. Well, I have complained about this many times on Twitter. And I excerpted a comment from someone had made at Vox Day's site, saying, yeah, here it goes. Comment of the day from Steve at Vox Day. And someone had asked, one would think that large social media companies would be reluctant to antagonize game and software developers for fear of creating angry and highly motivated competition. To which Steve responded, you'd think they'd be reluctant to ban anyone save for bots, scammers, malicious trolls, and people using their platform for illegal purposes. The only value in these companies is their user base. Driving away users because of politics is like UPS announcing they don't want to carry packages from people with red hair. And because of network effects, the more users they alienate, the stronger the competition will become. And unlike Google, which has a pretty solid lock on search, mobile, and free email for now, the likes of Facebook and Twitter can't rest on their laurels. The graveyard of once popular social media apps is a crowded one. Users are fickle, and hip young millennials are flocking to their rivals. SJW convergence means commercial self-sabotage. Now, I posted this at 12:48 p.m. on the 14th of June. And as of 8.5 hours later, this has over 10,000 impressions. Okay? 27 retweets, 43 likes, 115 link clips. So over 10,000 impressions. Keep that number in your head, right? But the question is, okay, so what of my big numbers, right? What of my numbers for the 24-hour period? 1,165, according to Twitter. This has been falling all day long for me. And when you look at my 28-day figures, they're falling as well. That Twitter is in the process of, according to Twitter, I have lost 12,000 impressions over the last 28-day period, over the last 12 hours.
I think we can call this these intersectional statistics, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you saw that Pamela Geller was suspended from Facebook.
Yeah. Well, her group that had been in existence for at least 10 months, I think it was, she said.
Twitter has this advisory council that Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn and two other feminists are on. And this comment was in the comment that I made on the comment that was made by the fellow at Vox Day was in reference to a game designer who had been kicked off Twitter. He was reinstated about 2 hours later after Drudge picked up the story. Mark Kern is his name. And what they said was, your avatar is obscene. There's some anime drawing. He said, well, that's funny because this comes from a PG movie, this art. It is shocking to me that seemingly Twitter has decided that, well, we don't really care about our business. We need to have the right people on our side, or alternately, we are going to use our business as a means to enforce SJW orthodoxy.
I would say probably not SJW. I would say deep state stuff.
Well, no, but it's SJW in the sense that Zoe, Anita Sarkeesian, I think, is a cynic and a phony.
Right.
Zoe Quinn is batshit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
She's the Five Guys Burgers and Fries lady, right?
That's right, yeah.
She was at the center of Gamergate. I mean, she was why Gamergate started. And then Twitter, yeah, let's bring that woman on board.
Yeah, but I mean, the loss of business is what we were discussing, I think, a few hours prior to this podcast, and that was amounting to possibly billions of dollars. So somebody has to be prepared to back them up to that extent. So if they're going to risk that much, is what I'm saying. So
well, hang on.
Now I just want to. Rewind a little bit here and ask you, because you did start off by saying this seemed to be coincident with the shooting in Orlando, and that's how you tied it in. Is that correct? It seemed to happen on that morning or after the following. Okay.
It began on Sunday.
Right.
It began on Sunday. Now, if people want to go to my Twitter feed, they can find that I've put up somewhere close to 10 examples from other people who said, yeah, that it just Sunday, Monday, and now Tuesday, it's like they have cratered me. Twitter, is this happening to anyone else? This phenomenon was noticed by no less than William Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins fame, who said that it appears that Twitter is going after Trump fans.
There you go. It's happening.
Now, you see, I have the trifecta here in that I am a Trump fan. I am an anti-Islamist, and I am an anti-feminist.
So, by the end of the week, you'll be gone.
There is a Saudi billionaire called Prince Alaouid bin Talal, and his investment firm now own more than 5% of Twitter. That's of 2015.
Okay. So that's my bet anyway. They're the ones that are calling the shots on this. They want to ensure
And this
victory.
prince has called Donald Trump a disgrace, not only to the GOP, but to all America.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, I'll just wrap this up. I'll wrap this up by saying one last thing. That the business of Twitter analytics is still rather mysterious. And Ricky Vaughn suggested to me, well, maybe it's just a question of the numbers, the totals having to catch up. In fact, it's gone in the other direction. Other people suggested to me that changes have been made to Twitter analytics. Well, I came to the conclusion that either Twitter is attempting to force out of Twitter all patriots, Trump supporters, anti-Islamists, anti-feminists, or they are suffering a critical database problem. Now, what if they made recent changes to their algorithm or algorithms? Well, I thought, well, that's possible. But if that's the case, why haven't they sent out an advisory to their users? It's rather difficult, as it turns out, to find a corporate page for Twitter. They're not exactly really upfront with much of that information.
Mm-hmm.
But I did find their blog. Nothing about any changes to Twitter analytics. I did find there's something like 3 stories on the main page of the Twitter blog. I did find a lengthy blog piece all about Ramadan and Twitter's great commitment to it and to Islam.
Well, there you go. Doesn't bode well for Twitter, but hopefully we'll see some new platforms popping up here right away, and people will start flocking to that, because this sounds like a bit of a mess.
Get with it, all of you people who I don't know.
Who can do that?
Come up with $1 billion idea.
Yes. Text.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. I understand this is difficult, but golly, I wish they would. I wish I would wake up tomorrow morning and someone like Pax Dickinson would say, hey, you don't have to use Twitter anymore. We got this. Okay, I'm going there.
Okay, well, it could happen. And with that, I think we're going to call an end to the first half of episode 42 of Two Kevins with Grace and Steele. We'll be back right after the break.
Now attention please, all passenger car owners. The Office of Defense Transportation has asked us to give you this message. This is National Tire Registration Week. To keep our American transportation system safe and working, the government is asking you and me to register all tires of passenger cars during the coming week. This means you register all tires of your passenger car, including the spare and any others you may have, without delay. For to get a new gasoline rationing book, or to keep the one you already have, you must register your tires first. You can get an official registration blank at your local rationing board, your garage, auto club, or at any filling station. Then when you've listed all your tires, file your registration form with your rationing board. Or if you live in the West or Middle West, present it when applying for your gas rationing coupon. Remember, the government ruling is you must register your tires or you cannot get any gas. So act tomorrow to register yours.
That's the placeholder ad for this week, a public service announcement for tire registration during wartime. By the way, keep that in mind next time someone tells you that your country needs to get entangled in some foreign war. Getting involved in crazy stuff over there always results in crazy crap over here. But enough of that. If you want to put your own ad in this spot, contact Grace and Steele through our website at twokevins.com. Go to the social media links and click on the blue envelope to email us. Welcome to the second half of episode 42 of Grace and Steele. The referendum on whether the British want to leave the European Union is just ahead on June 23rd. The Leave campaign was gathering steam up until the murder of MP Joe Cox by a mentally unstable man who reportedly shouted, "Britain first." The Remain campaign then ruthlessly exploited the killing, and their grisly tactics appear to have worked. The polls have drawn even on the day we're recording this, June 19th. Kevin, are you surprised by this turn of events?
Well, obviously I'm surprised by the shooting of Joe Cox, But the manner in which her shooting has been exploited by the Remain campaign, in retrospect, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. It's sickening, but no, it doesn't surprise me. These are the people that we're dealing with all over the world. Mm-hmm. These people have no morals. Let's put it that way. No morals.
Unscrupulous, willing to exploit the death of one of their own, actually, and
not just exploit one of their own. They have positively exulted in her death, even before she was actually dead. It was as if her only purpose in life had been to save the Remain campaign.
Yeah, that seemed to cause a little bit of paranoia amongst conspiracy-minded people like me. But I guess the fact that they jumped on it so quickly and then so relentlessly, I guess it was a little bit surprising.
This fellow Thomas Mayer, the killer, he's a nutter, and he's been in the system. Mm-hmm. Care in the community, as they say, or scare in the community for some years. The picture that we first saw of him,
right?
He is wearing camouflage clothing and red gloves, red working gloves, and a white baseball cap. And it turns out this is some sort of volunteer project.
Right.
For, I don't know whether it's all for nutters or simply for people that the government is helping out. This picture is about 4 or 5 years old. He sent a letter to a local newspaper in Northern England saying that he loved working on this volunteer project and it was far more useful to him than drugs and psychotherapy had been. So we know that he was at least on drugs, and we know the kind of antidepressants, or if not antipsychotics, which are routinely given to men like him, are very powerful indeed. This whole business stinks to high heaven. In the immediate aftermath of Joe Cox's death, the Telegraph interviewed people who had known him, including family members, and they said that he was not a political man, that they didn't know that he had any opinions about the referendum. And I don't know, have you noticed this? Did you see that this story about him being this ultra-right-winger, violent ultra-right-winger, this was all coordinated out of the Southern Poverty Law Center.
I did see them release their information on it, and
where the hell would they get information like this?
They turned up with receipts from some organization they claimed was a far-right bookseller out of the United States, and they appear.
And how would they have this information?
I have no idea. Apparently, this went out of business, and they somehow ended up with all the papers. Or at least they ended up with this paper. And they obviously have it in some kind of database because they pulled it out of a hat really fast. Shockingly fast, I thought.
Yeah, I got a distinct feel of this being an Antifa operation right from the very beginning. You remember I told you that?
Yeah. Oh, I remember I was getting totally freaked out by it right from the beginning because of all the contradictions that were coming out. I mean, you talked about his mental health problems. Contrasting that were police searches of his house that say they turned up Nazi memorabilia and stuff like this, which we never saw. So,
well, I should mention that when he was charged in Westminster Crown Court, he was asked by the judge to give his name, and he responded, "Death to traitors, freedom for Britain." And then he was asked again his name, and he responded, "Death to traitors, freedom for Britain." Now, it's not unusual for people who are nuts to be attracted to Nazism. Mm-hmm. What's strange about this is that this guy seems to have been switched on. You know?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a movie here.
Activated. Switched on. Mm-hmm. MK Ultra style. Mm-hmm. In the last 2 days or so. The other thing that's very strange is that this the murder of Joe Cox was coincident with what is called in Britain a surgery. That's when MPs meet their constituents. And these surgeries are often rather hairy occasions because often these constituents are, well, unpleasant people. If anyone has seen Armando Iannucci's movie In the Loop, they will see an example of this, a character played by Steve Coogan, who has a complaint about a wall. And he also complains that they're trying to get rid of him. There's this phrase associated with a political assassination called disappointed office seeker.
Mm-hmm.
That people who insinuate themselves in the lives of members of parliament often become obsessed with the idea that the MPs have broken a promise to them, or that the MP has in some way done them wrong. Now, what is remarkable about it in this case is that every reporter in Britain knows about surgeries and knows about the type of man that this attracts. She wasn't even dead, and this was a political assassination.
Yep.
That's another remarkable thing.
Yes, indeed. And but the fact that they've only drawn level, I think, is a hopeful sign. And I even saw polls that suggested that this had the opposite effect of what you would assume. One point I just want to make about this killer was that only a nut would assume that this was going to help his side. If he insisted that he was an EU opponent, this was not, anybody in their right mind would have known this would not help their cause, right? So,
well, sure, that was a point that was made repeatedly by by Raheem Kassam, the editor of Breitbart London.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it is not something that anyone would do. Killing someone like Joe Cox, who wanted the Leave side to remain for all sorts of reasons. For all sorts of reasons, you simply wouldn't do it. If you were, oh yes, neo-Nazis are supporting Leave. Well, I'm sure there's, there's lots of neo-Nazis supporting Leave. I'm sure there's lots of neo-Nazis supporting Remain too, because Oswald Mosley, who was the sort of neo-Nazi, was one of the biggest supporters of European Union. Did you know that?
No, I didn't actually. That's a helpful fact, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Well, this is a story that I'm sure more is going to emerge in the days ahead, and of course.
Well, one last thing. There have been demands from the Remain campaign, from Yvette Cooper, from David Cameron, from George Osborne, that little shit who has unaccountably become Chancellor of the Exchequer, effectively that the Leave side abandon its campaign. Oh, no posters. Oh, you're not allowed to talk about immigration. They have almost come out and said, well, how about you just throw the campaign now? How about you just acknowledge now that you've lost? Because it would be an outrage after Joe Cox's murder for us to be allowed to have democracy here.
Yeah. There you go. All I can say is, this is our last word before the vote. Britain stay strong, vote Leave. Untangle from these people. That's what I encourage you to do.
They've shown their true colors. I mean, they've been showing their true colors for 4 years, but the shape of the enemy can in no way be a surprise now.
Definitely. Okay, it sounds like you have a particular interest in this, Kevin.
I do have a particular
Is there
interest.
A special reason?
A personal interest. I am half British by birth, not English, but Welsh. The Welsh side of my family came to Canada on the Queen Mary in 1948, and the government secured their passage. My Welsh grandmother, was a widow. She had been married to a dentist whose name was Ivor Jenkin Jones, which I think might win the contest for the Welshest name ever. But their passage was paid for to come to Canada in 1948, and my grandmother brought her 2 children, my mother, Christine, and her brother, Peter. And so, as I say, I am half British, and I should explain that Canada was part of the British Empire. I'll have to remind people of this. I'll say something which I'm sure most Canadians don't know. There was no such thing as Canadian citizenship until 1947.
True.
That it was only with the Act of Westminster in 1931 that Canada got pretty much control over its foreign policy.
Are you asking?
For
Yes.
instance, in the First World War, when Britain went to war, Canada went to war. It was that simple. In the Second World War in 1939, there was this debate. Mackenzie King had to secure a separate vote on going to war. There was really no question that Canada was going to go to war. Canada remained a very British country right through the 1960s and into the early 1970s. That's to say, you would have on television, they showed the Frost Report.
I remember that, yeah.
The Two Ronnies, Monty Python, well before the United States, all this other British stuff. If you looked at the bestseller list that was published in Maclean's magazines, that most of the fiction bestsellers were actually British novelists.
And I think if you were a novelist in Canada, it was pretty much obligatory that you go over to Britain for a little while. I know
like Mordecai Richler.
Robertson Davies, all these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the music scene, this was something I was forced to remind myself of years later, because one becomes rather unsure about one's memory, in the absence of documentary evidence. And I had thought, didn't I hear these songs on the radio when I was a kid? And then I'd look at the charts, and no, apparently I didn't, because these weren't chart hits. But what I realized was that when you look at the charts, you're looking at American charts. And back then, the American charts and the British charts were very different. All of these songs that were hits in Britain, not all of them, but a great many, were also hits in Canada. I'll give you an example. My Generation by The Who. That was a chart hit in Canada. And I'll tell you a story about that. My mother, who was very keen to be down with the kids and their music, that I was living in Coquitlam, just outside of Vancouver at the time, and this song, which sounded like nothing I'd ever heard in my life, came on the radio. And I was rather transfixed by its violence. I'm 10 years old at the time, right?
Yeah.
And after it was over, my mother declared that that was the worst thing she had ever heard in her life. And I looked over at her and I thought, whoa, that's quite an endorsement.
No longer down with the kids.
The Kinks, the Small Faces, had these hits. So my taste in music was Anglophile, very strongly Anglophile. Like, a great many like the Canadians of my generation. And I kept this up. In 1973, I started subscribing to the British weekly music papers, Melody Maker and the New Musical Express. Now, the New Music, both of these papers at that time, they were selling over 200,000 copies a week. And particularly in the case of the New Musical Express, these were rather highbrow papers,
Yeah.
And so I became, I suppose you could say, obsessed with British music. And also that's how I got into krautrock, really, was because the British Music Press wrote about it.
Okay.
And so I started working at the University of British Columbia at the age of 18, first part-time, 18 in 1973, and I started working there full-time at the beginning of January 1974. And that was a very different time in that the government took a lot less of your money than it does now. So it was easy for me to save a not insignificant amount of money, despite the fact that I was hardly frugal. Because, as I say, you got to keep most of your money back in those days. And in 1976, just before my 21st birthday, I decided that I was going to go to Europe. And the plan was I was going to start off in London, and then I was going to go to the continent, and I was going to end up in Munich, and then, go home from there. Well, right at the end of June, I took a charter flight, Ward Air or something like that, one of these airlines that is no longer around. Airline travel was a lot more expensive then than it is now. So you looked for these deals, and one of these deals was to go on a charter. And this is a typically Canadian story that we just made it under the wire. We were out there on the tarmac, and there was a serious question of whether a plane was going to get in the air because the air traffic controllers of Canada were going to go on strike because of forced bilingualism. There's a Canadian story for you, huh?
Yeah.
Should say A.
I just want to quickly interject here that one of the reasons that we're talking about this is because we are coming up to the 40th anniversary of that trip, if my calculations are correct. Okay.
That's right.
40 years ago today.
By the time this
Pepper.
podcast is published, it will be almost exactly 40 years since I set sail, as it were.
Mm-hmm. For old England.
Yeah, we got into the air and we landed at not at Heathrow, but in the suburban airport, which involves a long train trip through Surrey to get to London. And it was a good time to go to London because the Canadian dollar was strong. It was really strong, you know?
I remember that period. Yeah, it was like $1.10 US.
It was, yes, that's right. With the result that the British pound was down to about $1.50 Canadian. And what that meant, I'll go into this in a little more detail shortly. What that meant was that the price of a pint of beer, the price of a short, scotch and soda, whatever, the price of a liqueur, it was all 32p, which was roughly 50 cents.
Well, can we talk about something other than the necessities?
We'll get there. Okay. Is there anything in particular you wanted to bring up now?
Oh, I don't know. Loaf of bread? I mean, you can find it to booze.
Buying bread? I had booked a stay at a hotel called the Kennedy, which was about a block away from Euston Station. And it cost £25 a day. And it was only years later it occurred to me that I was living like a king. Because a hotel costing £25 a day in 1976, that's pretty much luxury class. But that's where I stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And so why did I go there? Well, to immerse myself in rock music, actually, because I had a list. I had a list of all the records I wanted to buy that you couldn't get in Canada. And they didn't have weight restrictions back in those days, which is lucky, because I was carrying, I would guess, 75, 100 pounds worth of records.
Really?
In suitcase. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I bought, 75 pounds. I think I bought something like about 75 LPs and about 50 singles and EPs.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That'd be dangerous to stick that into luggage. Yeah.
I had a long list, starting with Can, the German band. And Can had, shortly before, signed to Virgin Records, Richard Branson's company.
Mm-hmm.
And not far from where I was staying, there was the Virgin Records store on New Oxford Street, where they had all the Can records. Oh my God, the stuff that I bought. Big Star. Oh, it just goes on and on. It was just like, oh my God, they have this? Oh, no. And they have this? Oh, and they have this too?
And then all of a sudden, another suitcase is needed. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Well, more music. Okay. I don't know anything about London. I don't know anyone there. And so I walk out of my hotel and I start walking south, I guess. And I'm on Tottenham Court Road. And there's a pub, and it's called the Prince of Wales. At that time, I don't know, there must have been 1,000 pubs in Britain called the Prince of Wales. They're all called now the Slug and Cabbage. They all have these stupid, ironic names now,
Oh, do
right?
they? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. But back in those days, they were all called things like the Prince of Wales or the Duke of Connaught,
Right, okay.
etc.
Royalty.
Well, anyway, there's a pub, and they seemed like normal people. I did have, a problem once near the Roundhouse, and I'll get to the Roundhouse later. Okay, I'm going to see a show. Pub nearby. I walk in, and I notice that everyone's staring at me. Yeah, this is weird. What am I wearing the wrong gang colors? Right? And I notice these weird looks on people's faces and sort of sneering looks or smirks or whatever, or even lascivious glances. And then, I don't know, I'm in this place for about 15 minutes, and I look around. Oh, this must be what they call a gay pub. Oh, all right.
Uh-huh.
Nowadays they have that rainbow sticker on the door.
I wouldn't
And
know.
I appreciate the rainbow sticker because it means this place is not for me.
Even though you have objected to the rainbow, but...
I have objected to the rainbow, but,
Okay.
Swings and roundabouts.
Gotcha.
Right? So I started hanging out at the Prince of Wales pub. And
is that the gay bar? No, that's not.
No,
okay.
No. So, good one, Kevin.
Okay.
So if I don't have something scheduled, I'm there every night. And they had 2 records which they played incessantly, and it was like heaven and hell. They had the first ABBA's Greatest Hits, and I love ABBA, like all good people, and they had the Eagles' Greatest Hits. And my reaction or opinion of the Eagles, if anyone's seen the Big Lebowski, and I'm sure many of you have, you remember the scene with the black taxi cab driver?
Of course, yes. He throws him out of the cab.
Don't ever screw with a black man's radio, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I've had a tough day, and I hate the fucking Eagles, right?
Yeah.
That's my attitude right from the very beginning, and I hate them with a passion still. But, swings and roundabouts, right?
Again with the swings and roundabouts. Okay.
Now, I'm going to mention how poor England was at the time. And I knew a little bit about this because I read the newspapers, not just the music papers, but, the Telegraph and such like. I read the other rock press, Rolling Stone, Cream, Crawdaddy, etc. And there were certain types of ads that you saw in Rolling Stone. And basically, it was not much different from Playboy magazine. The assumption was, hey, you're a happening young person and you've got money to spend. So here are the consumer accoutrements, which are going to perfect your life. In the New Musical Express and Melody Maker, aside from the ads for record stores, concerts, and the records themselves, there were very prominent ads for encouraging young people to join the police or go into the mines. And I saw this and I thought, yeah, these young people are much poorer there. And I think I've mentioned on a previous podcast about the bogs not being heated.
Yeah, you did that.
Right? Okay. And that was a shocker. Well, here's another one, okay? Ice. This was the famous summer of 1976, the hottest summer of the century, where for over a week the temperature exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit. My word, it was hot. I was traveling around on the tube, and I was just covered with schmutz and sweat. I was taking 2 showers a day. Okay. So ice, the beer, they call their beer cool, ice cool, right? That's something of an exaggeration, or at least it was then.
Sounds better than tepid.
Yeah, well, it pretty much was tepid because the beer was kept in a counter below the counter, and it wasn't what I'd call cool, let alone cold. So I don't know. I was drinking shorts, gin and tonic or whatever, not all the time. But they didn't give you ice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had this ice bucket there with what you might call slivers of ice. And so that I would open the ice bucket, and I noticed the publicans' hot eyes on me. You're using my ice, are you? And so, okay, here's 2 slivers of ice, and he's giving me a look that says, okay, that's enough, laddie. That's not enough ice for me. This ice is pretty much dissolved in my glass already. And a couple more slices, and he's glaring at me. Yeah, okay, I guess I don't need any more ice.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, well, it seems to me that they got refrigeration and they started to lose their Britishness. They used to be quite a point of pride that they didn't have this ice or refrigeration. Beer must be consumed warm is what they insisted at the time.
I had been at this pub, the Prince of Wales, for several days, and the locals had noticed that I was a foreigner who was splashing the cash. And I guess I'd become friendly with this group of young men and women. And one of them asked me, so what you do for a living? I said, truthfully, I shelve books in a library. So what do you really do for a living? I shelve books in a library. And he gave me that look that said, fine, be that way. I picked up a girl from that crowd, and her name was Jackie. And she was a student nurse. Now, years later, I would have become involved with another English girl named Jackie. Well, I mean, what are the chances of that, right?
Sounds like a trend.
Well, no, I suppose it was, this sort of beta desperation, because near the end of my stay in London, this rather more attractive and considerably more intelligent member of this crowd said to me, if you were looking for an English girlfriend, you could have had me. And I thought, yeah, she makes a good point.
Yes. Well, I'll have to tell the story of my English girlfriend sometime. Perhaps I'll put that in my valise. I had a really good time.
I want to talk about the British and technology, particularly electricity. I had heard all these strange stories about Britain, such as peas with everything. Actually, I think Arnold Wexler, the playwright, wrote a play with that name, Peas with Everything. And I thought, no, that can't be true. Guess what? It was true. I once ordered a pizza and got peas on the side. I had been told that at Wimpy Burgers, I thought, well, this place is notorious, and I've got to go to a Wimpy's, right? Mm-hmm. That they boiled their hamburgers, and I thought, nah, that can't be true. Guess what? True. But the biggest shock was about electricity, because I was told that when you buy appliances in Britain, they don't come with plugs. And I thought, nah, that can't be true. How would that work, right? And, well, here's what I found out. That I told you I was having 2 showers a day. So I was having to dry my hair twice a day. And the hotel I was staying at, they had one hair dryer, a communal hair dryer, as it were. So I would call to the front desk, and they'd send someone up with the hair dryer. But occasionally other people were using it, and I thought, this is silly. I'm just going to buy one. I mean, I'm here for 4 weeks. So, it makes sense. So I walked down to Selfridges, which is a major department store. Would they have that American actor doing this, Mr. Selfridges? Have you heard of this?
No, I don't know that.
It's this hit show in Britain and America about the founder of the chain. And so, okay, where are the hair dryers? And okay, they're on, let's say, floor number 3. And there was a trestle table there with a bunch of hair dryers. And I looked at it, and it says, see, there's a cord here and with a plug. Yeah, that was all nonsense, right? Uh-huh. So I pick it up and I take it to the counter, and the sales clerk says, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that, sir. What do you mean? Well, no, you just can't go and pick up a hairdryer. I can't. Why not? No, we'll get a salesman here, okay? Oh, what is this, communism? Everyone's got to have a job? So, no, they call over a salesman. And, okay, hairdryer. I want this one, okay? This one suits my purposes. He says, yeah, very good, sir. And he gets me one, and I said, excuse me, there's no plug. He says, no, they don't come with plugs. Well, how does that work exactly? Okay, well, you have to buy one separately. Where? Is it right here? No, it's on a different floor. It's in our electrical department. Well, seriously? Yeah. Okay. So what do I do then? Well, then you go to this department and they solder it on for you. And I thought, you've got to be taking the piss. Seriously. You've got to be.
Right.
But nope. I bought the hairdryer, then I went to another floor and I bought the plug, and then I went to the electrical department to have it soldered on. And the reason for that is they have these huge ceramic 3-point plugs in Britain. You've seen them, right?
Yeah, the 220 thing or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and they were switching to this, and it was just absolutely crazy. But I became convinced
DCs
that the British are terrified of electricity. And this was confirmed to me one night when I was watching television in my hotel room. And at that time, it switched off around 11 o'clock at night. I think the latest they went was midnight, and I believe that was only on at the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm watching London weekend television, I believe it was. And they have what you call a compare, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a man who was there during the links, the interstitial bits. And he's wearing a dinner jacket, right?
Yeah.
And telling us that you've just seen this, now you're going to see that, which starts at some reason at 1904, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. What, 704? Why would you start a program 704? Never mind that. Anyway, so it runs to the end, okay? And this fellow comes on and says, thank you very much for listening to tonight's programming on London Weekend Television. Now, we would request you all to turn off your televisions and to unplug them from the wall. Unplug them from the wall? What are they afraid of? That the television's going to burst into flames? So that the screen faded out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And about 30 seconds later, the man's voice came. Just his voice, not his image, to say, and if you can still hear me, this means you haven't disconnected your television set correctly.
Big Brother's watching you. I got to go back here. I got to ask about this, okay? Yeah. You said you were there during one of the hottest weeks on record.
That's right.
Yeah. I live in Edmonton, and it's a pretty cold place.
Yeah.
And it's been about 30 years since I've used a hairdryer. Why did you need a hairdryer? Were you feathering your bangs or something?
No, I had a big mop of curls.
Yeah. Can you provide us with a picture of that?
I'd rather not. I actually do have my passport photograph. But
I gotta see that.
It was really not that much different from, say, what Roger Daltrey looked like circa 1971. I'm not joking. Okay. It's embarrassing to admit, but there you have it.
Okay. All right. Continue. You were going to tell us about bands or something.
I have to tell about bands. Okay.
Yeah, that's.
So what's the hot thing? Well, apparently there's this thing called punk rock, right?
Mm.
So again, on Oxford Street, there was this place called the 100 Club, the legendary 100 Club. And, well, there was this band called the Sex Pistols playing, and that sounded pretty exciting, right?
Hmm.
So I went to see the Sex Pistols. And the Sex Pistols the opening act was a band called The Damned.
Mm-hmm.
Also later to become famous. I thought the Sex Pistols were just great,
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were tremendous right from the very beginning. I noticed that there was a Revox tape recorder recording the whole things. And as far as I know, to this day, I saw them twice a week apart I don't believe that these tapes have ever been released. I'm going to say maybe they weren't up to snuff, but given the amount of dreck that has been released under the Sex Pistols name, that can't be the reason. Anyway, so I'm in the bar of the 100 Club, and I recognize someone. And it was someone who was well known at the time. He was in a band called Brinsley Schwartz, and his name was Nick Lowe. And Nick, this was so long ago that Nick Lowe still wore glasses and still drank alcohol. Well, he wears glasses now again, but that's because he's an old man, even older than me. And I had never bought any of the Brinsley Schwartz's records, but I knew about him. He was always being written about in the gossip columns and such like, and I just sidled up to him and started talking to me. My word, he was a friendly fellow. I must have talked to him for, I don't know, something like 3/4 of an hour. And there had been this, he would have been crucified in the internet age. Apparently, there was this singer called Michael Desbars who later became an actor. He was on Roseanne and all these other shows. He was with a band called Silverhead.
Okay.
And they were joking in some pub. There had been David Cassidy. These teeny boppers were huge in Britain. There had been a crush at a David Cassidy concert, and someone had been killed, or a couple of people had been killed, and they were joking about how they were going to write some American-style sob song about this, and they were overheard by some gossip columnist, and this was written up, and things were pretty ugly for a time there for Nick Lowe.
Okay.
But so I formed a very high impression of Nick Lowe, and, not long after that, of course, he became around that time, he became a recording artist in his own right, under his own name. And he started putting out these great records with or without Dave Edmunds. He later became a famous producer. Made his first 2 solo records, Pure Pop for Now People and Labor of Lust. I can't recommend them highly enough. They're just A+ records, both of them. So I saw Nick again. I was to see him several times. And I saw him after the Sex Pistols played, and I said, well, what'd you think, Nick? And he said, rubbish, absolute rubbish. After I got home, I was shocked to find out that he was producing The Damned. He produced their first record. They used to call him Basher because he didn't have a lot of time for studio frippery. And he used to tell the people he was producing, bash it out now and I'll tart it up later. Years later, I appropriated this myself because when I was an editor, I'd want writers' copy. Oh, no, I'm still working on it. And I said, just send it to me now. They say, oh, no, but it's not ready. It's not perfect. And I just say, bash it out now and I'll tart it up later. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I saw the Sex Pistols twice and the Damned twice. I went to the fabled Marquee Club to see Eddie and the Hot Rods, who were a very important pre-punk band, who I liked. They put on a great show. And again, when I returned, shortly thereafter, they put out an EP. And the EP, some of the EP had been recorded at the Marquee. And there was this bit at the end, we were all sitting in these horrible little plastic chairs, the molded plastic chairs. And it's like, oh no, it's the encore and we're really getting into it now, right? So people started passing the chairs over their heads backwards, right? And that is on the song that was recorded. I was there, right, when this happened. That was pretty thrilling, right?
Okay.
There was a concert, July the 4th, 1976, 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, right?
Mm-hmm.
The headlining band was a band called the Flaming Groovies. Not very many people know about them, but I knew about them, and I had some of their records. They were from San Francisco, and they started out as a hippie band. And then they became kind of an early roots rock kind of band, even a proto-punk band, when George Loney was their singer. But when this fellow Cyril took over, they became sort of a British Invasion revival band. And they had been produced by Dave Edmunds, and they liked the response in Britain better than America, and they kind of relocated, and they were the headliners on this July the 4th, 1976 show at the Roundhouse, which is the end of the line, where they turn the trains around.
Yeah, I know what a roundhouse is.
This place called Chalk Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And for, I don't know, a few decades, it was a recording, it was a performing hall. And there's a lot, you could look this up on Wikipedia, a lot of famous performances there, going Pink Floyd even and such like, right? So I went to the July 4th, 1976 show is one of the most famous concerts in music history. And I was there. And every punk rocker, whether they had a band, they were there. They were all there. It's one of those things like Woodstock. Oh, I was there. No, I don't recall seeing you there. Oh, I was there, pal. And in the bar before, I don't know, a couple of blocks away, the Sex Pistols were there. And Glenn Matlock made fun of me because I was only drinking a half pint, suggesting that I wasn't quite manly. And before the show,
maybe
I ran
into
the
curls.
Yeah, maybe it was the curls. I ran into Johnny Rotten on the floor, and I said, "Hi, Johnny." And he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Just a fan." And he said, "Aren't they all?" And then I got into it with the drummer. I was talking about how much I love the band, and I said something like, "Well, I think people have the wrong idea about your band, that you're violent and you're vicious or whatever." And I said, "But it's kind of like, you're pretending to be like that." He said, "Well, you're calling us pretentious then?" No, that's not what I meant.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so there's the show at the Roundhouse. And, so the opening act was the Stranglers, who later on became famous. And, they had those great early songs like Get a Grip on Yourself and Peaches. If you've seen the film Sexy Beast, you will know the song Peaches. And, but the Ramones, right? The Ramones, the fabled Ramones. That's where all the punkers were there to see, were the Ramones, because they had this legendary rap. And then they came to England, and they were shocked to find out that they had fans. The record had come out in April. It wasn't available in Canada. I bought my copy in Britain. But of course, I fell in love with the Ramones, and I've seen pictures. I don't have any copy, but you can see me with my Roger Daltrey curls right up near the front of the stage in some of these pictures.
Oh, so we can get some visual evidence of this.
It's something like about 100 coffee table books, about the whole punk rock thing.
Okay.
Well, there was another concert the next day at this club in North London called Dingwalls. And it was the same 3 acts again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same people were there, all the punkers. And Nick Lowe was there, and Rat Scabies, the drummer for The Damned, wearing his jean jacket, in which he'd done an illustration in ink, The Subterraneans, his previous band. And I met Charles Shar Murray of the New Musical Express. He wasn't all that friendly, but I met Nick Kent, who was one of my journalistic heroes. And Nick Kent's thing was that he was like the rock critic version of Keith Richards, okay? You saw that guy, and what band is he in? No, he writes for a newspaper. No, what band is he in? Well, he was in these bands with Chrissie Hynde and all of those punkers, Rat Scabies, right?
Hmm.
So I recognized him, and you might be surprised. Well, you wouldn't be surprised by this. If you go up to a journalist and say, "Hey, I know who you are, and I like your work," you'd be surprised how well that goes over.
Doesn't happen
Nick
very
Kent
often.
Who was famous. Like, he was the star of the New Musical Express. He kept getting suspended because of these lurid stories that he wrote, and I don't know, drug use or whatever. He had this girlfriend, and she was in full Wonder Woman costume, including the lariat. And she really filled out that bustier. Golly, I was impressed.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick Kent asked if he could borrow £5, which was a lot of money in those days, let me tell you. Equivalent to, $100, $150 Canadian today. I never got the money back, but I thought, well, Nick Kent borrowed a $5 off me, right? And this fellow, Jake Riviera, who became the manager of Nick Lowe and Elvis Costello. He was Elvis Costello's manager for many years. This sort of legendary figure. He was known then as Andrew Jakeman, his actual name. And so there were a bunch of these music industry types associated with Stiff Records and all that. They were sitting this table at Dingwall's, and Nick Kent happened to mention that just before I had left Vancouver, I'd got a hold of the freshly printed or published issue of Cream magazine that had Lester Bang's review of Black and Blue, which was the latest Rolling Stones album. And so there's a weird situation that I'm like called over, and there are these people, they're all leaning forward in this nightclub. Well, what does Lester Bangs have to say about the Rolling Stones? And the headline was, and Lester almost certainly wrote his own headline, was Bland on Bland. A parody of the Bob Dylan.
Right, yeah, Blonde on Blonde, yeah, fine.
Yeah, so I was the cynosure of all eyes.
Glory days for you then, eh? Mm-hmm.
At the I decided I was going to immerse myself in this whole experience, and I've been reading about Malcolm McLaren for years. He had this store on the King's Road in Chelsea, which was called Let It Rock, Too Fast to Live, Too Young to Die. At one point, it was called Seditionaries, and at the time that I was there, it was called Sex. And what was playing on the jukebox or on the record system? Jonathan Richman, who I'd been reading about for years and never heard. And they were playing Jonathan Richman's record, and I was impressed. I bought a pair of leather trousers at Malcolm McLaren's shop, and I wore them to the Roundhouse show. And I was so exhilarated by the Roundhouse show that I walked from Chalk Farm to Euston. And it was very, very hot, even at like 1 o'clock in the morning. It was so hot that I had considerable difficulty in peeling off my trousers. And after I had peeled them off, I looked at my legs, my white legs, and saw that they were stained black from hip to knee.
Cool. At what point in the story do you get woken up by the woman in the pumpkin costume?
No, that was New Hampshire.
I know.
That was New Hampshire.
I just thought I'd cross the wires here. Okay.
Were you suggesting I'm making these things up?
No, please continue. We were talking about Brexit, weren't we? No. Okay. Wonderful trip, though. Would you want to go back?
Well, there are, if you've seen that show, Peep Show, you will know, remember when Mark Corrigan gets mugged in one of these pedestrian tunnels they have in London?
Right.
Well, I found myself availing myself of these pedestrian tunnels, and, I was a young man, and I didn't worry about things like that. But London was a very different place 40 years ago. If I were there now, and I don't really see any reason why I would want to go there now because it's not English anymore, that there's no bloody way I'm going to enter one of those tunnels.
Sure, okay. But
it's not going to happen.
Yes, but we weren't just talking about, London when we started this thing, and you actually mentioned that you weren't English, you were Welsh. Would you ever want to go back to or go to Wales? Any desire?
Never had much interest in the place.
Pardon me?
Never had much interest in the place.
There you go. The old country, not interested.
Well, not that old. I was going to go to Dublin. This girl that I'd picked up, I was going to make a side trip, and I wanted to go to Dublin, and she said, I don't want to go to Dublin, take me to Paris. And I thought, all right, I'll take you to Paris then. So we went to Paris, and I was in Paris for almost a week, and I had some funny things happen to me in Paris. This idea that they rip off tourists and they don't like tourists?
I've heard it.
That was my experience.
Oh, okay.
That At the time, I was pretty butthurt about it. Afterwards, I thought, why should they like tourists? Why should they like a bunch of foreigners rampaging over their beautiful city? I'm on their side. In any event, the plane from Heathrow to Paris landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport, where I was on a moving sidewalk for the first time. It was like the future, right?
Oh, yeah.
Remember George Costanza said, when do we get the moving sidewalks? Well, they had the moving sidewalks at Charles de Gaulle. And Air France had laid on a bus to take us to the center of the city. Okay. Well, it took us to the center of the city, and we stopped off at this depot, Air France depot, whereupon I hailed a cab. This taxi driver drove around Paris for about an hour before depositing me at my hotel, and it wasn't very long after that I discovered that the depot was 2 blocks away from the Arc de Triomphe, and my hotel was 2 blocks further away from the Arc de Triomphe. That is to say, it was 4 blocks away from the Air France depot, and he drove me around for about an hour and charged a fortune.
This is orientation, isn't it? No?
Yeah, I was at this Paris hotel where they take your passport and you're a foreigner and you're under suspicion the whole time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I remember reading Le Figaro or whatever in my hotel. And one of my great heroes, Andrei Amalrik, the Soviet dissident, had been released. And there was a picture of him on the front page with his wife and their cat, the famous cat he'd written about in his book. That was quite pleasing. But when I was in Paris, I don't know, I mostly hung around the Champs-Élysées, you know. I went up the Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower. I would sit there in cafes on the Champs-Élysées and attempt to order things in French, you know. Un sandwich saucisson, s'il vous plaît. Pardon, monsieur?
Feeling very sophisticated, no doubt.
You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, of course you'd understand what I'm saying. Okay, you're going to make me say it in English? Okay, I can do that too, right? And I used to drink Kronenberg beer, which I'd never had before, you know, and eat my sandwiches and sit on the Champs-Élysées. There's a famous record store there that's open till about midnight on the Champs-Élysées. I can't remember the name offhand. I'll find it on Wikipedia later. There's all these neon signs. It was rather like the Chelsea drugstore in London. And I went there, and I found a copy of Absolutely Live by the Doors, because the French love the Doors, right? I also got a copy of the third Buffalo Springfield album, which was unavailable in Canada. And that was a great thrill. But I had developed a very serious toothache. I had a impacted tooth, which was causing me a fever, which wasn't good, you know, with the 100-degree temperature. And sweating and pain. And later in London, a National Health Service dentist offered to do it all for free. And I was rather like Jack Donaghy on 30 Rock. I was stupid. No, I'm not going to let you give me free dental service. What kind of country is this anyway?
Uh-huh. Okay.
I bought a train ticket from Paris to Munich because I wanted to see Germany, particularly Bavaria. But I thought, this is not going to work. I'm too sick. I don't want to get too far away from London. So I thought I'm going to cash in my ticket. So I went to the Gare Saint-Lazare, I think it was, waited in a very long line, only to be told that, no, it's that line, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see the situation in all these movies, right?
Yep.
So then I go to the end of this very long line and get to the front, and I explain in my halting French that I bought this train ticket to Munich. I mean, they knew what I was talking about, right? That I wanted a refund. Je ne comprends pas. Je ne comprends pas, monsieur, right? And I was thinking, they're really determined not to give me my refund. And I felt this tap on my shoulder. And I looked around, and there was this group of middle-aged women. And one of them says, we apologize for interrupting your conversation, and we don't want to be rude, but we're French teachers from the United States on vacation, and we'll translate for you if you like. Why, thank you. So they go to the front of the line and blah, 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 blah in France. And I looked at the face of the man, and he was in a fury because there was no way he wasn't giving me back my money now.
There you go. Well,
thank you for that, America. Thank you.
There you go.
I appreciate it.
American French teachers in Paris.
Yeah. When I got back from this girlfriend, Jackie, well, you got sick now or whatever, and I want to go back to London. So I paid for her to take the plane back. I took the train and the ferry. And the ferry was fun because they had Heineken on tap. And, of course, BC ferries, there's no alcohol sold, right? And it was a strange thing because I walked into this, what do you call them, compartments in the train. Mm-hmm. And there was this one man sitting there. And he sort of looked me over as if he were vetting me. And he asked me some question, he starts speaking English, and okay. It's like, you can stay. And then until the train left, he would vet everyone. They're French or whatever, it didn't matter. And he would ask them questions or look them over and decide whether he was going to let them in his compartment. He was choosing his companions for the journey to Calais.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
Which I thought was very amusing. But then when I was running a little short of money because I had been spending it like water. And so I transferred from the Kennedy in Euston to a hotel in Bloomsbury, which was very down market at the time. And I don't recall much about that, except that, it was at a time when white people still worked in English hotels. And the porter who took the bags to my room was this old Irishman. And he said, "So your name's Kevin?" "Well, my name's Kevin too. And isn't it a great day?" And I heard that and I thought, I wish I'd gone to Dublin.
Okay, well, I think at this point we've got to wrap it up now, Kevin. You want to pronounce the final word on Britain? Worth it? Not worth it?
Oh, well, look, I'm glad. I shall be eternally grateful that I saw London when it was still London.
And maybe it will be one day again.
That'll be a bigger project than leaving the EU.
That's true. Okay. All right. That's the wrap for episode 42 of Two Kevins with Grace and Steele. We've had a great time. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
I'm going to get lit up when the lights go up in London. I'm going to get lit up as I've never been before. You will find me on the tiles. You will find me wreathed in smiles. I'm gonna get so lit up I'll be visible for miles. The city will sit up when the lights go up in London. We'll all be lit up as the Strand was, only more, much more. And before the party's played out, they will fetch the fire brigade out to the littest, uppest scene you ever saw.